Team Group Delta Max RGB SSD 1TB opinion. The 1TB Team Group Delta Max RGB SSD retails for $150. Plus. Amazing RGB lighting. Good random reads. Almost no performance drop when SLC cache exhausted. Solid performance. DRAM cache. High price premium for RGB capability. Additional cable required for RGB. Latencies could be better. When I first saw Team Group's Delta Max RGB SSD at Computex 2019, I was stunned at how smooth and perfect the lighting effects looked, almost like they put an LCD screen on top of the SSD. What also makes things convenient is that the Delta Max hooks into your motherboard's RGB output, so you can synchronize the SSD with the lighting effects of the rest of your system. Each of the 20 LEDs can be controlled individually, both in color and brightness. Team Group did a great job achieving such nice lighting with only 20 LEDs, which not only helps limit power consumption, but also keeps drive temperatures at decent levels. The drive was barely hand warmed during all our testing. In order to control the RGB LEDs, you have to connect an additional cable to your SSD, from the motherboard's 5-pin RGB header. If you don't connect the cable, the SSD itself will work perfectly fine, but the lighting remains off, good if you prefer to turn off the lights. Unfortunately, that additional cable adds a bit to the bulk in your case. Adita's Spectrix S40G, for example, transfers all its RGB data over the M.2 slot interface, so an additional cable is not required. Adita also supplies their own software for RGB control, so you can use that if your motherboard lacks RGB support. On the Delta Max RGB, you can connect a power-only cable and the SSD will light up with a static predefined pattern, which looks great, but isn't controllable though. In terms of performance, the Delta Max does fine, just a few percentage points behind the fastest 2.5 inches SATA SSDs, but the differences are small. Under the hood, it is powered by a SMI 2258G controller, paired with Samsung 48-layer 3D TLC flash and 1GB of DRAM. While the SLC cache might seem small at first with just 10GB for a 1TB drive, it is actually sufficient, as the drive barely sees a loss in performance when writing more than those 10GB in one go. With a sustained write speed of 428 MB per second, it is actually one of the best SATA drives in the test. M.2 SSDs are a good deal faster, though, and their pricing is coming down rapidly, too. With a price of $150 for the tested 1TB version, the Delta Max RGB is not certainly cheap. You can find SSDs with similar performance for a third cheaper, but they lack the adjustable RGB functionality of the Delta Max. Actually, I'm only aware of 3 2.5 inches SATA RGB SSDs, Team Group T-Force Delta RGB, Kingston HyperX Fury RGB and the Delta Max RGB, and the lighting quality of the Delta Max RGB is the best of those, by far. If M.2 is an option, too, the Adita S40G 1TB retails for the same $150, with better performance. But if you absolutely must have a 2.5 inches RGB SSD to show off in your case mod build, then the options are limited and I'd recommend the Delta Max, despite its high pricing.